To quote Robert Jenrick, the Secretary of State for Housing, who said in March 2020 that, quote, "No one should lose their home as a result of the coronavirus pandemic," end quote. That sounds like a promise the government is breaking by cutting the rent arrears minimum to 6 months, only half the period for which the SARS-CoV-2 virus has been raging. I'll also quote Shelter Chief Executive Pauline Neate on this statutory instrument, which she described as the minimum required to keep people safe in their homes, as the very useful briefing from Generation Rent on this SI notes. Eviction notices can still be served and possession notices are being granted, while the government is asking people not to leave their homes. And all of this only runs until February 21. To complete my trio of quotes, I'll go to Green London Assembly member Sian Berry. Everyone has a right to a home. The government doing the minimum here really is not enough. In Scotland and Wales, more is being done. Both nations have loan schemes. In Wales, a 5-year loan with an APR of 1%. In Scotland, the loans are interest-free, and there's also an increase in direct support to tenants. Better than England, although of course the problem with loans is that they still have to be paid back, which for many households living permanently on the edge, even pre-COVID, in a society with a minimum wage well below the real living wage, and the horrendous insecurity of 0 hours contracts, this is hardly any relief from the massive pressure of poverty and inequality under which so many live to say, here, have a loan. Clearly, what is needed are grants, support for the poorest, utterly failed by our massively expensive, exploitative, privatised housing system, to lift them at least to ground level, out of the massive financial hole they find themselves in through no fault of their own. For we've progressively, over decades, under governments of various political colours, destroyed a system that provided genuinely affordable, generally decent homes for all. Let's not forget that in 1979, nearly half the British population lived in secure council homes. Some of those were not as well built or maintained as they should have been, or in areas with adequate facilities and opportunities, but they were secure. What we've replaced that with, as the noble Lord Byrne just said, is a market. And that is not a successful model for housing. Now, as you might predict from those remarks, the Green Group supports both of the regret motions, particularly the noble Baroness Lady Grenda's, with its focus on the need to provide long-term security for tenants. But looking at that longer term, we have to move away from regarding houses primarily as financial assets and instead focus on providing everyone with a secure, genuinely affordable home that meets their needs. Although, of course, I acknowledge that's beyond the immediate scope of this SI. I note research last month from Aldermore Bank showing that half of renters now regard their circumstances unstable, with 1 in 10 struggling to pay their rent since March. We clearly have a broken housing system. Coincidentally, I spent this morning chairing a Westminster Forum session about our broken food system. That's 2 basics of human existence, food and housing, on this planet with a climate emergency and a nature crisis, where as a species we are smashing through multiple planetary limits while failing miserably to meet even basic human needs in a collectively wealthy country like the United Kingdom. I'd have to say that we have a broken economic, social and political system. We have to rescue people in the immediate future, but we also have to think longer term to massive transformational change. Thank you, my lords.